This video is intended for the absolute beginner in the wonderful world of SketchUp. SketchUp is a 3D design software that I personally find relatively intuitive to use, and I've been teaching to high school and middle school students for over a decade now. So let's go ahead and jump into it. With both of these pieces of software, they look almost identical. With both of them, you need to click the Start Modeling button. And in SketchUp for Schools versus SketchUp Free, you'll notice that the interfaces are exactly the same. Something that I always encourage all of my students to do right off the bat is find the F11 key on their keyboard and change their view into full screen. The next thing is, if this is something that you want to save, you need to get in the habit of clicking on the Untitled button up here and typing in your file name. Our file name conventions in our particular shop is we always save it with our first name, period, last name, period, and then whatever it is that we are building. So first name, period, last name, period, and we're going to call this Crash Course. So the first thing that I need to teach you how to do is how to navigate. On your keyboard, what I want you to do is tap the H key for hand. The hand tool looks like that. And the hand tool is also located 3/4 of the way down. Okay, and that is a pan tool. So if I click my mouse and I move side to side, that allows me to move side to side. Additionally, if you have a rolly wheel on your mouse, if you roll the wheel in and roll the wheel out, that allows you to zoom in and out. If I click and I hold down that rolly wheel, it allows me to orbit around. Now, if your mouse is not performing correctly, what you need to do is you need to click down here and make sure that you don't have trackpad selected, for example. Personally, I find a mouse to be 100% easier than trying to do SketchUp on a trackpad. All right, let's talk about our axes. So with our axes, we have a blue axis, which is vertical. We have a green axis, which is going this direction. We have a red axis, which is going this direction. And we have a dotted blue axis, which is going this direction. A very, very common mistake for a student is that they will end up lost out in space and they will not know where their object is that they're drawing. So what I always encourage my newbie beginner students to do is to set up something called a scene. On the right-hand side, what we're going to do is we are going to go to the Scenes button, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up from the bottom. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to click on the My Scenes, and I'm going to click on Add Scene. Now, let's show you what this does. So let's say, for example, that I am way the heck out in space, and I have no idea where my project is. I can go back to that sort of movie symbol, click on it, and I can click on the scene, and it'll pull me exactly back to that view, which is great for sort of the newbie, beginner, etc. The next thing we need to talk about is your toolbars. On the left-hand side, these are all of your drawing and design tools. On the right-hand side, these are ways to change settings within SketchUp. There's also something called a component warehouse, but 90% of what you do on SketchUp as the newbie is going to be on these tools on the left-hand side. If you hover on top of these tools, you'll see a pop-up, and this says select, and then parentheses, you'll see the space. What that indicates is what the tool sort of does. This is an eraser tool, and what I do, I've had a bit more experience with SketchUp, is I typically will never actually click on anything over here. What I rely on is the keyboard in front of me. So if I want to activate, for example, the eraser tool, I tap the E on my keyboard. If I want to activate the pointer tool, I tap the space bar. If I want to activate the line tool, I tap the L key for line. If I want to activate the rectangle tool, I tap the R key. If I want to push pull, I hit the P button. If I want to move something, I hit the M button. If I want to rotate something, Q button. If I want to offset something, I hit the F button. If I want to measure something, I hit the T button for tape measure. If I want to pan from left to right, I hit the H button. Most of the tools in SketchUp are pretty intuitive to the average English speaker. So, for example, a tool that's not listed here is the circle tool. Circle starts with a C, so I would tap the C key, and what I can do is I can go ahead and draw a circle. At this point, I would recommend that you pause and either take a screenshot of these or save these, because this will make your life so much faster and easier when you do start the actual design process. So let's go ahead and we're going to rotate our view to a view which looks something like this. To do that, I'm using a combination of my rolly wheel, which is held down right now, and actually the H key. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get to a view which looks something like that. In this case, we're going to start off by drawing just some freeforms, and then by the end of the lesson, I'm going to teach you how to add dimensions to those freeforms. We're going to start by drawing a rectangle. So I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to drag out a random size rectangle. On the bottom of my screen, you'll notice that it gives me some dimensions. The rectangle I just drew is 5'3" inches and 3/4 and so forth. You cannot actually physically click here. That's a really common misconception, a really common newbie mistake, is you think they can click here, and you cannot actually do that. I want to give this rectangle some form of thickness or dimension, three-dimensionality. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to click the P key, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up to about the height of my avatar here. So I can go ahead and rotate around, and I can see now that I have a three-dimensional object. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use the tape measure tool, and we're going to set up a couple of points to draw lines on. To do that, I'm going to tap the T key, or I'm going to find the tape measure on the left-hand side, and I'm going to click somewhere along the edge of this face, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag to the left. And if you notice, there's a little red arrow that appears. Sometimes if your dragging isn't working, you might have to rotate your view. And let's go ahead and click and drag out a dotted line about there. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to trace on top of that dotted line with the line tool. So I'm going to tap the L key, and I'm going to click on the bottom. I'm going to click on the top, and I'm actually going to push this in a little. So push-pull starts with P. It's also located over here. I'm going to push this in about halfway or so, and we'll let it go. So that looks great. So what we have is a sort of three-dimensional, let's call that a L-shaped object. The next thing that I want to do is I actually want to take this and I want to draw a circle on the inside of it, okay, or in the center. So for the circle tool, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw an X in the center. And if I hover right here, you can see there's something that pops up that says a midpoint. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to drag down midpoint to midpoint. I'm going to tap the L key again, and I'm going to go midpoint to midpoint. The next thing I want to do is actually draw a circle exactly in this midpoint. So to do that, the circle starts with C. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag a circle. Let's make it about that big. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to erase some of these extra lines. I could, if I wanted to right now, push and pull that out if I wanted that intended shape. But in this case, what I want to do is actually create a hollow core through our shape. So to do that, I can click on the eraser tool, and I can go through and I could try to carefully erase some of these lines. My personal preference is actually to use something called the pointer tool. So the pointer tool is located right here. So I'm going to select that line, and then on my keyboard, I'm going to hit the delete key, not the backspace key. So delete key and delete key, I find that way more precise. I also don't need this line right here. I don't need this line right here. I don't need this line right here. And I don't need this line right here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and I'm actually going to push pull it through my shape. A key that you should know is the K key, which is a transparency key. So if I hit the K key, K is in Kit Kat. So if I hit the Kit Kat key, what I can do is I can actually see that my object has turned translucent, and that gives me an indication of where I can push pull this to. So I'm going to select my circle, and if I want to push pull it, I'm going to jump over and grab my push pull tool, which is on the left hand side here. If I hit the P key, that'll also activate the push pull. And I'm going to go ahead and push this all the way through. And if you notice, I'm actually holding down my index finger, and I'm actually saying, hey, stop at this point. If I let go at that point, what'll happen is it'll stop at that point. You can also, if I hit Control Z or hit the undo button, here, let's go back, I can actually push it through and just keep going into infinity. So for the sake of this, I'm going to push pull. I'm going to hold down my index finger and I'm going to say, SketchUp, please stop right here on this edge. And I'm going to let go. Using my rolly wheel, I can rotate and I can see that I was actually able to cut all the way through. If you didn't cut all the way through, what you can do is you can actually hit the space bar. You could select this and then hit the delete key. So that looks pretty darn good. So let's go ahead and hit the K key again. And the next thing that I want to teach you how to use is something called the dimensioning tool. So I want to give this some form of size or scale. To do that, you have to find this tool right here, and there's not a quick key for that. You might have to click on the three little dots on the bottom here and try to find it somewhere in this toolbar right here. But in my case, mine is already activated. For the measuring tool, we have to click 3 times. First click, left-hand side. Second click, right-hand side. Third click is I'm going to pull it out. So with this, I have to tell SketchUp where I want to measure to and where I want that dimension to stop. So click number 1 is always on a corner. Click number 2 is always on a corner. Click number 3, I'm going to pull it left, I'm going to pull it right. And I'm going to say, hey, click 3, please stop and stick this measurement right here. Now, if you happen to not like where that measurement is, you can hover on top of it and it will allow you to move. Or you could hit the space bar, select it. Then what you can do is jump over the move key or hit the M button, and I could move this dimension back and forth. So currently, if you look at my random shape, it is 3'1" and 15/16 by 5'6" and 13/16. But go ahead and throw a couple dimensions on there, because when you are actually designing something, typically you want dimensions so that you can build it next door in the shop. So the next thing I want to teach you how to do is how to make a group and a component and talk about what those are. So a group versus a component. If I click on this, this entire thing turns blue, which indicates that it is locked and it is either a group or a component, and things that I draw on top of it aren't going to stick to it. If I click on the frame that I just drew, or this shape that I just drew, you can see how it just selects the one face that I clicked on. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn this into a group first off, and there's 2 ways to do that. First way is with my pointer tool. I can click 3 times really fast with my left-hand click, and it's going to turn the entire shape blue. The other way to do it is click, hold down your mouse, and draw a box around your rectangle or whatever other shape that you're trying to select. After it is entirely blue, I need to right-click on it and click Make Group. So if I click somewhere else in the green and I go back, and you can see how the entire object turns blue, that means that I've either grouped it or turned it into a component, that is. What I can do next is I can hit the Control C key and Control V, and I can copy, paste a new one over, just like you would in Microsoft Word or any other sort of editing software. Control C and Control V. SketchUp also has something called the M key, which we're going to talk about more in detail later on. So once again, let's go ahead and do that right from the outset. I made this a group. Okay, I'm going to hit the Control C, Control Copy, and then Control V as in Victor. And I'm going to go ahead and copy another object next to it. So this is really, really useful if you're doing multiples of something. You can copy paste a bunch of legs, for example, or if you're, I don't know, maybe you're doing shelves on a bookshelf and you want to copy paste all of those shelves. Now with this, if I want to open this up and edit this, what I need to do is I need to click on it twice, 1, 2, and you'll see how everything else around it is grayed out. And I could actually pull this, and I could change the dimension on this. I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm going to go back. What I want to do next is I want to show you how to make something called a component. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this thing that I just copied. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down and say Make Component. We're going to get a pop-up, and we're going to call this a frame. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and copy paste this 2 more times. So I'm going to hit the Control C and Control V. And whoops, I'm going to do that again. That didn't look very good. Control C, Control V. And I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this over somewhere. Control C, Control V. Click, and I'm going to drag this over somewhere. So currently, these 3 objects, this is a component, this is a component, this is a component. All 3 of these are actually clones of each other. So what I want you to show you right now is how this is amazing in SketchUp, because I can actually edit one and I'm going to edit them all at the same time. To open them up, I'm going to double click on it. And let's say, for example, I want to pull that face down. What you're going to notice is that all of these are pulling down at exactly the same time. So if you were designing, for example, let's say a simple table with 4 legs, and let's say, for example, that you drew the first leg a little bit too short, if you copy them as components, if you edit the one leg, it's going to edit the other leg, which is awesome. So for the sake of this, let's go ahead and pull this down by 5 inches, and we're going to hit enter. And if you'll notice is that we have a 5-inch thick piece on top of all of these. So that is the very, very, very basics of SketchUp. My hope was with this lesson is that you would learn how to navigate. You would learn how to draw some simple shapes. You would learn how to draw shapes with dimensions. My hope was with this lesson is that you hopefully can log into SketchUp and feel a bit more confident with what you're doing. Thanks.